Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Blue Raider Podcast, hosted by Jake Bolden and sponsored by the Conseco Group General Contracting. Don't miss another Tuesday episode by subscribing to the podcast on all streaming platforms or catch our visual presentation uploaded every week on YouTube. Don't miss our upcoming ticket giveaways by subscribing and following on all Blue Raider Podcast social media accounts on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Blue Raider Pod. Welcome back to the Blue Raider Podcast. I'm your host, Jake Bolden, and we have a great episode for you today. We're going to give you a little bit of a rundown, reaction from our first opening weekend game for the Blue Raiders against Tennessee Tech, as well as in the middle, stick around for an interview with the All-CUSA preseason selection midfielder Manon Lebargy as she talks about the Lady Raiders soccer program and her quick start to goal scoring this season, and then stick around to the very end where I will have a Behind the Enemy Lines segment with Ole Miss beat writer Michael Katz to preview the upcoming football matchup with the Ole Miss Rebels. But first, before we get into our episode, a word from our sponsor, the Conseco Group General Contracting. Since 1987, Conseco Group has been turning dreams into reality. Whether it's pre-construction consulting, construction management, design build, or renovations and improvements, we're here to exceed your expectations. At Conseco Group, we don't just deliver, we deliver with passion, precision, and unparalleled quality. Our hands-on approach ensures your investment is maximized and your vision is brought to life. From Clarksville all the way down to Columbia and beyond, trust Conseco Group to handle every detail with expertise and care. If you're ready to build your future, contact Conseco Group today at 615-298-9907 or visit their website at consecogroup.com. That's CONSECO group.com. And thanks again to the Conseco Group for sponsoring the Blue Raider Podcast. Now, let's get into our episode. We have a lot to react to, but I am bringing on today a analyst along with me from GoMiddle.com. He was there all fall camp, all day long in the heat, and we had to sit through quite the matchup on Saturday. Shayne, how's it going?
It's going good. A win is a win. It wasn't pretty, but they left week 1-1-0.
Yep, that's exactly how I look at it. It was a win's a win, and Mason says it, and we'll listen to his opening statements from his post-game press conference on Saturday here in just a minute. But the way that he put it, I thought was eloquent. It wasn't the win that we wanted, but it was the win that we needed. And without further ado, I will go ahead and we will listen to his post-game presser.
Tonight was an interesting night, to really say the least, right? And I want to say hats off to Tennessee Tech, Coach Wilder and that crew. They came in here and they played one heck of a ball game. You know, first games are what first games are, right? You know, you look early and you think that you're going to have an opportunity to go boat race somebody a little bit and just keep going, and then all of a sudden then you sputter out. And momentum. Football's a game of momentum, and I thought, you know, we had it early. Tennessee Tech, marched back. They took it, and that was okay. I don't think this group panicked. We wanted to play better, and what you saw from this team was growth, right? A lot of new faces, some adversity, and you have to learn how to win in a lot of different ways in college football. You got to learn sometimes how to play from ahead. You got to learn how to play from behind. And I think we got it all in one. You know, rain delay, playing from ahead, coming from behind. Look, I didn't want to draw it up that way, but what I felt was this football team learned a lot about itself, its character, you know, and winning does take what winning takes, right? It takes commitment for 4 quarters, 60 minutes every play, and we needed every bit of 4 quarters, 60 minutes and to get the victory. So, you know, there's a lot to be learned from game 1 to game 2. At the end of the year, nobody's going to look back and remember what the score was. What people are going to remember that it was a victory. And so I'm going to celebrate it that way, right? I got a lot of confidence in this team. I think we can get better. We had a couple of losses injury-wise in this ball game, so I hope we can get some of these guys back as we get ready to turn the corner and to play Ole Miss. But hats off again to Tennessee Tech.
All right. Well, that was Coach Mason there technically Sunday morning after that game on Saturday. Shayne, what do you gather from what Coach Mason had to say there?
I think it's the same thing. You wanted to get out with the win. You're talking about boat racing, Tennessee Tech. It definitely was trending that way after the first three possessions where they went up 21-0, but kind of stalled out after that. And with the weather delay, falling behind late, having a 2-minute drill, really a 1-minute drill to win the game, they really did experience everything that you could ask for in a game. And while it might not be the opponent that you wanted to experience all that against, it definitely gave some good experience for later in the year with more big games like Western Kentucky, Liberty, and FIU and Duke coming up.
I agree. I think that there's again, there's so much that I think what I love to hear from him though is there wasn't many excuses being made. I think one thing is he understands what took place on Saturday wasn't what he expected or what anyone expected or what anyone wanted. But it's what happened, and I think that one thing we're going to grow from this. There's a lot of things that I mean, boat racing is definitely the outcome that we all wanted to see. You get out to that early 21-0 lead, and you think that's it. Like this game is over. You're able to pack up. Oh, we survived the 2.5 hour rain delay, and everything's going to be fine and dandy. And then you get a special teams play by Tech. They down it on the one, get a safety. Then you go three, or then you have to free kick it to them. They work it down for a field goal. It's 21-5 at the half, and the offense just, as he says, goes stagnant. It just sputters, and that's kind of my biggest concern over anything. But I want to caution anyone that may have that same thought process that I have, that things are bad or the offense is bad. I think I think for the most part they just kept it close to the chest. And maybe you would agree with me, Shayne, that I think that they withheld a lot of the passing game there. They didn't necessarily we didn't see it to that 1 minute drill at the end of the game. They didn't get the ball to Amari Kelly. They were targeting Miles Butler, who was great. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think that's your number one target and should have been your number one target all game. Holden Willis was practically non-existent. The only time he ever got the ball was during a scramble drill. So I think that the emphasis going into that game was they want to run the ball. They want to work in the rotation of the offensive line, see the different formations that they can go up against with that offensive line pairings. And we'll worry about passing the ball against Ole Miss. That's kind of, at least that was what I took away from the Saturday matchup.
Oh yeah, after the Miles Butler touchdown, I think that was the one that put them up 21-0. That was one of offensive coordinator Bodie Reeder's best plays of the night, in my opinion. And then after that, it definitely felt very reserved until the end, where they drew up some plays for Omari Kelly. They had the run play for Frank Peasant to get down and obviously score. And then with the offensive line, the whole second quarter was just straight up the second unit. So it was a full-blown rotation, whether it was a tryout or what remains to be seen, especially with center Julius Pierce, probably the leader of the unit, going down. But it definitely felt reserved. I don't know if they were saving for Ole Miss. One would hope that's not what the offense looks like for the remainder of the season, and more so what it looks like on the first three drives. And I think it will personally be what it looks like on the first three drives. But you definitely got to figure out what you're doing at the offensive line up front before you can do anything else with the rest of the offense.
Yeah, I agree. I think with the offensive line scenario, now that Julius Pierce is out, I know that Mason in his press conference on Monday didn't necessarily say anything in regards to what to expect about a return for him. Didn't give any sort of timeline or anything like that. So that leaves a lot of question marks already with a line that was already questionable. But I know in our little notes that I'd written together for us, I thought the run game was improved. And I know you kind of had some comments on that in regards to being improved. I think one thing though is I think you would agree that we have a stable of backs now that are all good. We got four different guys that all got a few carries. Terry Wilkins getting the least there at 4, but you got your Frank Peasant, Flip Credle getting 10 carries apiece. Shaquille Middlebrooks looked excellent for a young guy. I think one thing that is promising is that if we were able to create holes of some sort, that we have a good group of running backs that could do some damage in Conference USA.
Absolutely, and they were effective on the outside. I think you saw Tennessee Tech was selling out to stop the run, especially between the tackles. Frank Peasant obviously had that one between the tackles at the end, but that was more in prevent defense for Tech. You saw Credle on that one drive that he ended up scoring a touchdown on, was able to kick it outside a couple times. And then the extension of the run game with screens and slipping running backs out. That was very effective, and they mentioned that in the press conference that they probably should have ran a couple more screens just because they were picking up 10 yards of play with that. And then Jaquel Millbrook, he was a guy all camp that there was a lot of buzz. That was no accident when he was interviewed after the final scrimmage of the offseason. And so they feel really good about that room. And I think if you can establish a run game, that Bodie Reeder's offense opens up a lot more. And I think they feel really good about the running back room overall.
And I'll continue to harp on this. I just felt like the passing game was just so reserved. It was so boring. And when we look at the final attempts, you got 35 attempts on 68 plays. I understand that that's over half of them, but I know going into the fourth quarter, the number was even lower because we were forced to have to throw the ball there late in the game just to get us back into position to win the game. So prior to that fourth quarter drive, that it was a necessity to make that drive, we refuse to pass, and like I said, part of me is worried about it, but a part of me thinks that it's just they were trying their best to do what could be difficult for them, which is to run the ball, which is to try those different rotations on the offensive line. So I felt like when it was all said and done, it felt like almost like a tryout, as you said. Like I don't love the look of that. I don't love the fact that you're playing an opponent who their only objective is to come in and get a win over you. This is, after all, a rivalry game with a lot of deep history. So I don't want to harp too much more on that. But I want to go back to, some of the positives with this game. I thought the defense relative for the game did a pretty good job. I thought the secondary had their troubles, but I think a lot of that had to do with Jordan Potts at quarterback for Tech. He broke contain a lot, which is going to be a problem if we can't contain shifty quarterbacks, mobile quarterbacks. It's going to be a problem this upcoming Saturday, of course, with Jackson Dart coming. But it's going to be a problem for the conference in general. You got guys like Caden Salter at Liberty, TJ Finley at WKU. You got Keon Jenkins at FIU. And then a guy that I really liked this last weekend from Sam Houston State was Hunter Watson, a guy who was just announced starter, had a great game against Rice, a 10-point underdog. They go in there and they absolutely waylay the Owls. But I digress. You've got to be able to control and contain those mobile quarterbacks. And for what it's worth, we struggled pretty tremendously getting any sort of pressure on an FCS line and an FCS quarterback. But Jordan Potts is good. I'll give him credit. But I think I have concerns about the pass rush as well as being able to defend that long if we're not going to be able to rush a quarterback.
Yeah, the three-man front definitely was generating pressure, I feel like, all night. But Potts being able to create and improvise and get outside of the pocket really opened up a lot for their offense and gave MTSU troubles, which that will be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see if that continues with Parker Hughes and Drew Francis back at linebacker whenever they come back at some point in the season too. So now they're definitely going to have to fix that with TJ Finley and Keon Jenkins and Caden Salter and the kid at Sam Houston that was Conference USA Player of the Week. And even with Duke, you have Malik Murphy that transferred from Texas. So it doesn't get any easier. If anything, it gets harder in terms of better mobile quarterbacks and playing the length of the game. So they're going to have to maintain that edge moving forward, and that is something to definitely watch this week. I don't know how much they'll run Jackson Dart. I have fear that he didn't run any last week in week 1. So I don't know if they'll try to run him in a game they should win. But yeah, that's going to be something to watch all season if they cannot get that fixed.
And as back to the health questions, both of our starting cornerbacks go down. You got Diari McDonald, who went down very early in the game. It appeared to be a soft tissue injury. I hate to speculate, but we'll find out a little bit more about where his status is for the Ole Miss game. And then Tyrell Raby, the other starting cornerback, goes down there in the second quarter. So you're having to try out again your cornerback situation. Abdul Muhammad got most of it. We saw Trayvon Farrell there at the nickelback position get a few snaps. Trayvon had a tough game. I thought James Mond, in the few snaps that he saw, actually performed really well. He did a great job there late in the game at the nickelback position. So that's another area of question. And whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, those guys are going to get tried out. They're going to face one of the best receiving corps in the country this weekend in Oxford. So we're going to test them a lot. And again, maybe that's good, maybe that's bad, but it's a weird situation to be in when you have Tennessee Tech. You didn't perform great. You're going against Ole Miss, who's one of the best in the country, and then all of this is in preparation for a WKU game in week 3. So I don't know what I saw. Wasn't too impressed with the backup cornerbacks, an area that I thought we'd have a little bit more depth at. But I'm interested to hear, Shayne, what you think in regards to those guys that had to fill in spots for those injuries.
I'm not sure if McDonald came back in, but Tyrell Raby was able to come back in later in the game, so he looked all right coming back. I definitely thought James Mons, like you said, would be more of a factor in the slot, the transfer from Indiana. Trevon Farrell didn't have the best game exactly, and so I thought Mons would work his way in with more of an athletic slot guy that Tech had, and but that didn't happen. So that was interesting to me. But the cornerbacks, it wasn't even as much giving up big receptions as much as not being able to tackle in space once McDonald and Raby came out of the game. So that's going to be something they absolutely have to clean up with Ole Miss, with Trey Harris and Juice Wells and all the receivers they have. Because if they cannot tackle those guys in space, it's going to be a long, long game for Middle Tennessee.
Yeah, let's keep building off of that. Some of the takeaways from this Saturday moving into this next Saturday with Ole Miss. I think you hit the nail on the head there with tackling in the space was the biggest issue with the secondary. I thought Brennan Harris was excellent. I didn't think the front seven was bad. They just allowed the quarterback to break contain. Offensively, I'd love to see us pass the ball more. I just thought they were so conservative. But those are kind of my few takeaways. What are your takeaways from this Saturday going into next?
With the reserved passing attack, I think I would like to see them push the ball down the field a lot more. I think that was part of the problem with you weren't making Tennessee Tech pay for creeping up in the box. They had no reason to give you running lanes because they weren't afraid of Amari Kelly pushing or getting the ball down the field, or G. Carter, the transfer from Vanderbilt, getting the ball down the field. I remember one play, they had Carter and Kellen Stewart, and I think it was a 3rd down, and they tried to push it down the field, and I think Vadiato slightly overthrew Kellen Stewart. And I remember that play because it was like the only one that they did, trying to push it down the field. And I think that's going to be something they have to incorporate at some point into offense. And it's something they talked about all offseason, was trying to incorporate, was the downfield passing attack. And that will create more running lanes and better averages naturally with that. And then the second thing that I took away was in the middle of the game after Vadiato threw that first interception, he kind of fell into a slump. He threw his second interception, I want to say 1 or 2 drives later. That was returned for a pick 6. MTSU got bailed out by a targeting call. But if that call didn't happen, it could have kept and spiraling. So Vadiato's got to stay level-headed, and they have to establish a downfield passing attack.
Absolutely, I agree. Well, but before we hang up our call here, Shane, we got Ole Miss this Saturday. Kickoffs at 3:15 on the SEC Network. Opening lines at 42 points. Where do you see things falling this Saturday?
Probably around that line, to be honest. I think MTSU could be able to do some things. Ole Miss transfers this offseason to take advantage of a very good team that they have. So as they are still maybe building some chemistry under defensive coordinator Pete Golding, I think you could see the offense maybe sneak a touchdown in there. But it's probably going to be like a 45-13 or 48-13 type game, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think the real line on this Saturday to watch is going to be the over-under. I think I saw it 62.5, which, if all things perfect and it's a 42-point game, that would mean the Raiders would somehow manage to get 2 or 3 touchdowns on the board. And to the credit, maybe, in garbage time, if they pull out Dart like they did on Saturday, the Raiders find a way to get maybe 2 or 3 touchdowns in there. Who knows? I always think that's an interesting line to watch there, but excited for this Saturday. Hopefully we see some improvement with the offensive game, like we both mentioned there. But Shane, you're heading up a lot of the recruiting still that's going on. Things have really heated up more so than we've saw in the previous administration. Before we hang up, there was a lot of recruits here on Saturday, and unfortunately they got rained out. They probably didn't stick around to see the ending of that game. But tell us a little bit about the recruiting scene for the Blue Raiders and Derek Mason.
Yeah, they had 101 scheduled visitors. Now, not all made it, but most of them did, I think. So you still are looking at like 80 to 90 visitors. Uh, I mean, yeah, a lot of guys went home after the delay, especially the local guys. But they still had a lot of guys from like Alabama and Mississippi and Georgia that came up to visit, and they stuck it out. And yeah, there was a lot of excitement. Uh, seeing was it 16,000 fans was what athletics said, and it was getting filled up. The stadium was. The facilities are coming along, so there was a lot to see. There's Party in the Grove now, and I think the visits went really well. We'll have some stuff out during the week on from visitors, just reactions and interviews on that stuff. But yeah, no, I think they had really good visits. They had some big targets, uh, and they had some commits in town like Bo Bryan, that you would know if you were in the Lightning Lounge. A little shameless plug there. But yeah, I think they had an overall good weekend, and I think the Western Kentucky game coming up is going to be kind of what we thought this weekend was with recruiting. It's going to be another loaded visit weekend.
Absolutely. Another reason to get out there, fill up the stands. It obviously is going to help with recruiting if recruits show up and they see, a over half capacity stadium, much like they were reported for this Saturday. I would like to think we could get over that 16,000 mark and get a little over half capacity, which I guess that's not necessarily entirely true now that the stadium is being renovated. I'm sure our numbers are down a little bit, so 16,000 would be well over half, but nonetheless, get out there. 2 weeks, Western Kentucky, big rivalry. You should be there regardless, but definitely from the perspective, if you want this program to continue to excel, you need to be there and be loud, be proud, be blue, as they say. But Shayne Pickering, as he just plugged there over at Go Middle, we've got the premium subscription, of course. We have our ad that's thrown in here. Go over there, subscribe if you want to get all the scoop on recruiting information as well as all things Blue Raiders. Myself, Shayne, we contribute quite a bit over there onto the forums. So make sure you're checking all that out. But Shayne, I appreciate you coming on and talking ball with us today.
Yes, sir.
The BRP is proudly partnered with Rivals Network affiliate GoMiddle.com. Subscribe for premium content for all the inside scoop on MTSU athletics, recruiting, or join our free forums to discuss today's episode and all things Blue Raiders. The BRP is also partnered with the College Huddle, a nationwide collaborative effort with over 80 Division I programs represented. Check out the website at thecollegehuddle.com to catch up on all college football content with daily articles and episodes provided by the largest college podcast community on the internet. We take a break from our football conversation to introduce our next guest. She is a junior midfielder that led the Lady Raiders in goals scored and points in 2023 and earning a second-team All-CUSA honor last year. She was picked to the 2024 All-Conference CUSA preseason team. I am happy now to be joined by Manon Lebargy. Lebargy, how's it going?
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm great. And before we came on, as I was trying to get my pronunciation key right, I think you gave me a little interesting story, a little bit about your name and why Americans, you always encourage them to call you Lebargy as opposed to Manon.
Yeah, so because my name is Manon, but Americans pronounce it Manon. But in soccer, when we say Manon, that means someone is in your back and you're supposed to play the ball back to your defenders or another player. So now every time the coach says Manon, I'm like, okay, is he talking to me or he's talking about me having someone in my back, so I should play back? So now people call me Lebargy because it's easier.
Absolutely, yeah, not nearly as confusing. And personally, as an American, Lebargy is a lot easier to pronounce. So I thought that was a really interesting story about that. But I want to get to know a little bit about you. Like I said at the top of the episode, as I introducing you, you earned All-CUSA preseason honors as a midfielder, as a junior. You led the team in goals last year. Tell me a little bit. I mean, did that recognition kind of surprise you? I mean, where were you when that was announced?
So when it was announced, we were in preseason and I was at the job. So during preseason, we eat at the job for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I was there and I wasn't on my phone because preseason is crazy. The schedule is crazy. So you don't really have time. Then people were hugging me saying, "Hey, congratulations." I was like, for what? I mean, oh, you just got nominated for preseason all conference. I'm like, Oh, okay, great. Thank you for letting for
Mm.
letting me know. But yeah, I'm really happy about the nomination. But I think it's a work team because I can't do that without my teammates. But yeah, really happy. But now you have to show it on the field and score more and show more on the field.
Absolutely. You were kind of a fixture last year on the offensive side. Even though you're a midfielder, you had a lot of goals. Typically, that comes from a forward position. But I want to know from you: have you the first couple weeks have been a little rough for your team? You did get your first goal last weekend. Tell
Mhm.
me, do you feel like there's a little bit more pressure on you this year to score?
I think there's always more pressure when you get nominated, but I think it's good pressure. Yeah, every game you stress, you're like, oh, I need to score. But the most important thing is to win as a team. Yeah, if I don't provide a goal or an assist, I'll be here on the field and give 100% effort for everything.
Absolutely. And tell me a little bit. I know we're interviewing on Friday. This will come out on Tuesday, but the viewers, you lost last night against North Alabama in a really tough second half battle there.
Yeah.
Your last couple games have kind of just been that way. You're knotted up. It's a really close matchup against Tennessee Tech. You pulled it out, but against last night, you kind of dropped it. Tell me a little bit what you think from your perspective, what needs to change, to kind of get back into your winning groove.
I think as we get closer, we score the first goal, but then we have to finish our opportunities. We have to score the second, the third. Yeah, yesterday we scored the first, and then we scored second and third, but the ref unfortunately called it off. But it wasn't an offside, but it's okay. We have to deal with also the outside problems. But I think we have to finish our opportunities, be brave in defense, and keep our game plan. I mean, we have a game plan at the beginning of the game. We have to stick with it and listen to the coaches at halftime. I think I think yesterday's loss was really unfortunate. Referees didn't help us, and we got scored on two set pieces. So lack of focus in those two opportunities from them.
I see. So when you're moving into conference play, one thing that I know you're a junior this year, last year, we saw an improvement, especially on the conference side of things. As you
Mhm.
get closer and closer to conference play, what are things that you know are an emphasis for you guys, things that you've got to be better at when you get ready for conference play coming up?
What we need to be better at, I think, be more aggressive. I know conference USA games, or it's like a knockout game. You play one game, you're like, okay, it's a win or a loss, but you have to win. The next game, if you lose, you're like, you gotta get after it because conference there, you have to get to the six.
Right.
So every game is death for
Mm.
like it's death. You have to put your body on the line. You have to give everything. Conference USA games are great for that because yes, there's lots of pressure to be honest, but I think it's good pressure because you play for something. Right now we're in like season, we don't really play for like anything really except like building up and be ready for conference games. But when conference comes, you have to give everything.
Yeah, you touched on it there a little bit at the end about how you're having to build relationships or build with your new teammates, and this team in particular lost a lot of talent last year, and you bring in a lot of new talent this season. How are you as a midfielder? You kind of intertwine with both perspectives of the game, right, with the defense and the offensive side. How are you meshing with some of these new faces?
I think we got a lot of new internationals and new transfer. For example, Emma Brown, she's an English player, so we kind of have the same soccer IQ. So I think it's really easy with the defensive lines, Sasha and Emma, to play with them, and also Rizwi and Ari in the midfielder bring a lot of techniques. I love playing with them because they're such a good IQ um and they can like see the game like other midfielders can really see. I think everyone brings something different. It's a lot of new energy, and I just love having new people. Yeah, we lost a lot of new talents, but I think we need to build a new chemistry coming in Conference USA games.
Yeah. Do you think you are doing a good job as far as building that relationship or that chemistry that you're talking about? Because you're kind of again one of the older faces now on this team. How are you able to build that chemistry with those new girls?
To be honest, I love joking with them. I love being funny. So every time at practice, I show up, I score a goal, and I'm I'm going crazy and I'm celebrating. And I think that's like how you build relationship with people. You get funny, you get to know them. You go out. For example, we won last Sunday, and we just went out for ice cream because we celebrated the first win, and we just get closer, like doing things outside of the soccer aspect.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a pretty cool thing. Everyone goes out for ice cream
Mm-hmm.
after a win. Absolutely. Well, I want to know from you, back to a little bit about Lebargy's game in regards to what you prefer. Now, I know you score a lot of goals for a midfielder. What about your game in particular? Are there things that you've kind of worked on this offseason, moving on to this upcoming year that you have worked on and want to get better at?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For my off season, I really worked on my physical aspect. So I wanted to come here really fit. Unfortunately, I got injured this summer for like a month and a half, but I got back. I got back really like hard. I tried to be as fit as I could. Um, I think one thing I could improve is my defensive game. I know I need to work harder in defense because I have that gap between, yeah, I love having the ball, turning, like play. But once I don't have the ball, I need to get back. Need to help my teammates because they need me. One thing I need to keep going. It's going forward. Go get in the box. Yeah, I'm a midfielder. I'm attacking midfielder. I need to get in the box and help my striker. And I think I did a great job this past 3 4 games, turning and get the ball behind the defensive line. And I think I need to keep doing that because it helped a lot with Eden and everyone on the wing. I played the ball a lot to Eden because she makes such good runs, and then once she plays across, like Emma is here. Like yesterday, we scored 2 goals like that. Unfortunately, they were called offside, but it's, yeah. That's
Well,
my
Edun, you mentioned her. She's got quite the game as well. One of the few players that you have a lot of experience playing with.
yeah.
I want to know the relationship you have with her. Someone like Faith Adji, Emma Pedersen, who's had a great start to her season as well. As
Mhm.
far as those girls, what kind of relationship do you have with them?
Oh, I have great relationship. For example, this summer we went to Norway together. Like that was great. We spent a week together. We had National Day with them. They were wearing their like uniforms that they were on the 17th of May, and we were in Oslo celebrating that. That was great. So I think having great relationship with those players help having great relationship on the field. If you don't really get along with someone, it's hard to like connect with each other on the field. And I think it helps a lot. And off the field, they're great girls. I love all of my teammates, and especially they're from Norway, so we have that European vibes together. Like we
Hmm.
play the same soccer, and I think we understand each other better compared to Americans who don't really have the same experience we had previously.
And talk about the freshman Lexi Dendis. She got her first goal last night,
Mhm.
and she really worked for it. She had quite a few shot on goals last night. She was not going to be denied last night.
I know, I know. No, it's that girl, Lexi. Big up to you, but she's doing a great job as a freshman coming in and be a starter and then score your first goal for your third, fourth game. It's insane. She even had for her first game her first assist. No, she's great. She's bringing so much energy. She's super fast. She needs to keep um letting down the pressure, because I think obviously she has pressure, and once conference USA games are gonna come, the pressure might go up a little bit. But I try to help her as much as I can, trying to say in game, okay, calm down, because she's doing 100% all the time, but now she can't run all the time.
Mhm.
She needs to to calm down. I remember the first game, we had an assist. She had an assist in 10 minutes of the game, and she was like, I said, hey, it's your first game. Calm down. I know you want to give everything, but we have 80 minutes more in that game, so chill, chill.
Absolutely. Well, I want to switch back to get to know you a little bit more. I know before you came here to America and you played soccer at MTSU in France, you were kind of a trick, we could say the jack of all trades. You played a lot of sports outside of just soccer. I
Yeah.
want to know how you landed on soccer. I mean, I'll list them: handball, badminton, volleyball, ping pong. You did all that
Mhm.
in school prior to here. Tell me how you landed on soccer.
So I started playing soccer when I was 5 years old, and my family is such a golf family. So I
Mhm.
used to play both both sports. And when I came and I was 13, I had to choose between golf and soccer because that was way too much, and I was playing at high level for both of them. And I got recruited to Lille, so it's a professional club in France. So my hope were higher playing soccer than golf. So I choose soccer, and then as the seasons start, I play for the national under 19, and I got selected my last year before coming in the US to play for the professional team in Lost. So I played couple games there, great experience, but I wanted a new experience, so I chose to come here at MTSU. And in high school I was in a boarding school, and in boarding school it's a sports high school, so I was playing yeah, I was playing soccer obviously, but I was also playing handball. I used to play handball for the high school team. I used to play volleyball, badminton as part of the PE education as well.
Hmm.
But yeah, I just love sports too much that I wanted to do that my whole life.
Absolutely. Well, I noticed your minor is also in sports management. Do you want? Is there a career that you kind of? What are you looking to do when you're out of college?
Out of college right now, my dream has always been to be a professional soccer player. So right now, I'm focusing on that. I I don't have any idea what I want to do, but I really want to work in sports, anything related to sports, sports management. Probably mean soccer because I have a big passion for soccer. So I don't really know, but right now I'm a focused professional, and then try to just go back maybe in France or Europe and try to find a sports related job.
Absolutely. Well, that's very good stuff. Well, Lebargy, I appreciate you taking some time. I know you're a student as well as an athlete, and you took
Mhm.
some time to squeeze us in this week to get this interview. But I appreciate you coming on. And from the Blue Raider podcast and all the fans, we wish you the best of luck with the rest of the season.
Go Blue Raiders!
Did you know the Blue Raider podcast has an online store? You can now support your favorite podcast by checking out our selection at our website, blueraiderpodcast.com. And stay tuned for new merchandise releases as we collaborate with athletes in NIL partnerships.
Our final guest joining the BRP is we're going to go behind enemy lines and learn a little bit about our upcoming football opponent. We face the Ole Miss Rebels, and joining us today is going into his fourth season as a reporter for the Ole Miss Athletics with the Northeast Mississippi Daily Journal. It is Michael Katz. Michael, how's it going?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
I can't complain. We came out with a win, much like the Rebels did this last week. We're going over our initial reaction earlier in the episode, but I want to hear from you. I think there's no complaints coming from Oxford after week one.
Yeah, I mean, listen, when you're playing against teams that you are supposed to beat pretty favorably, you want to come out with no major injuries, and you want to take care of business and not really leave any sort of doubt about anything. And I mean, from start to finish, I mean, this was just a complete. Let's be honest, they could have probably hung 100 had they wanted to. There were a couple moments where I thought Lane Kiffin did want to, but he kind of took his foot off the gas a little bit in the second half. But you saw Jackson Dart was immaculate. The defense was, there's been all this talk about this great defensive line. It looked amazing. Again, when you hold someone to when you have 772 yards and you only give up 172, I think you feel pretty good about everything.
And in today's game, I know that the playoff expands to 12 this year, and Kiffin definitely wants to be a part of that, and he's in a very tough SEC conference as it is. It's vital that he blows teams out like that because he has to have those necessary wins.
Yeah, and I think too, when you start getting into, later games in the schedule when maybe things aren't as smooth sailing, you're not going to have the opportunity to test all these different plays and maybe expand the playbook and do the sorts of things, experiment the way he was able to. I mean, listen, not only were they able to blow him out, but they were able to blow him out by putting in a ton of backups too. And getting those guys work. I mean, Austin Simmons' first college pass attempt was a 35-yard touchdown pass. And he's a guy that we've never really seen, outside of practice. So I think it's, again, it's style matters. Again, look at, obviously a different situation, but, Oregon and Idaho this weekend, that was a really I know the numbers didn't necessarily fully tell the whole story of that game, but that was a 10-point game. Is that going to matter in the long run? I don't think so. I think Oregon's still really, really good. But when you look at, say, hey, look what we did against inferior competition, I think it's always good to say we did what we had to do, and we did it without question.
Well, I'm afraid that MTSU is headed for the same destination that Furman was, and again, Furman is no slouch. When they're a top 10 coaches poll FCS team, that they have a lot themselves to prove that they earned that ranking as well. Ole Miss kind of ran a boat race him. It's kind of the term that's been going around here. But I want to break down a little bit about Ole Miss this season in general. As you already touched on, the defensive line was an area that they thought they needed to improve on. They certainly did. They picked up all SEC talent there. Tell me about that front seven that is going to be so tough, not only for MTSU, but for all of SEC.
Yeah, I think Lane Kiffin has said it a couple times this fall that this is the first time in his college coaching career, even dating back to SC or Tennessee, his time as a head coach at least, that he can look out there and see just elite athletic defensive line talent. This was a really good team last year. They won 11 games. They won the Peach Bowl. They did a lot of really good things, but in that game against Georgia, there was a clear deficit, especially up front. Skill positions, almost is always going to be pretty good. They usually figure that out. But it's always the question is, can you match up front? And they lost 52-17. It was pretty clear that they couldn't. And after that game, Lane said they needed to get better in places like that. And that's been the whole offseason is what do you do to get your program to the next level? It's not receivers and quarterbacks and stuff. Yeah, that stuff's great, but you already have that. It's you have to get better, more athletic, and deeper up front so that when you're in these games against Georgia, against Alabama, against LSU, whoever it may be, and you need to run the clock out, you have to be able to do it. And so this is that offensive line, defensive line, all of that. And so we've talked a lot about the defensive line. That's obviously sort of been the point of emphasis when you bring in Princely Monielin and Walter Nolan and guys like that. But they did the same thing on the offensive line too. They're trying to have it be positions where you're not going to get run over at the end of games, and you're going to do the running over at the end of games. So I think it's really interesting to look at. Lane has said it. This team looks really good. It doesn't mean they're going to be very good, but they look the part, and that's the first time, even since he's been here too, that he really feels. At least he says he feels that way. And they've had some good squads here, so I think that there really has been an investment on the trenches because that's the only thing that's really been holding them back.
Well, that's a good transition point to the offensive side there. The offensive line going into the season had a few question marks because you're returning guys, but starting experience isn't necessarily there. You got a transfer there on the interior line. Tell me about the offensive line. I know they didn't look too shaky in that week 1 matchup, but again, kind of going against an inferior opponent. But tell me a little bit about that offensive line and how things stacked up in week 1.
Yeah, and they got some injuries there now, right now too, and Ole Miss always plays that stuff pretty close to the vest in terms of what they're going to let out. And I know that has to change starting SEC play. I'm very curious to see how that's going to go. But they bring back a lot of starters, and they were good starters, but I don't think that Lane is okay with just good anymore. I think they need to be better. They need to be bullies. They need to be athletes, and so they brought in a lot of guys with a ton of talent that haven't started here. But they brought in 2 guys who started at Washington last year. That was the best offensive line in the country. You bring in guys like that. You bring in the guy who started at left tackle at North Carolina in Diego Pounds. You bring in all these guys, and so it's the thing I've been so curious about is like, how do you mix and match all these pieces, at least early on? Because you've got guys who have played, and you've got guys who, again, the guy who started at left tackle this past weekend, he started every game in 2022, but he only started 2 games last year. So it's like he wasn't a starter last year, but he started before. So it's like you've got this sort of balance of guys who have played a ton of football, either here or or elsewhere. They haven't all played together, at least recently. So I think it's, again, I don't think you learn a ton against a team like Furman. I actually thought they were probably going to run the ball a little bit more in that game, at least early. I know the rushing stats ended up looking pretty gaudy towards the end, but I thought they were going to kind of impose their will a little bit more early, but it was clearly Jackson Dart's night in terms of how they wanted to handle that. But his pockets looked good for the most part. He had time. I think you saw what you needed to see in a game like that.
Well, the biggest concern for an MTSU fan going into this Saturday's matchup is going to be how many yards can Jackson Dart put up. We saw this last weekend against Tennessee Tech. A backup, Jordan Potts, put up over 200 yards in a backup role, and then you see a guy like Jackson Dart, who's going to be a Heisman hopeful, in just 2 quarters of play, almost 500 yards, 6 touchdowns. I mean, the guy, I think Heisman hopeful is a little not really wishful thinking for the guy. I mean, he's got to be top tier already, and given these first 2 games for him, he's got to be up there on the list. So tell me about Jackson Dart's game. What makes him such the special talent he is? And of course, to build off of that too, is wide receiver. Like the receiving core has got to be one of the best in the country this year.
Yeah, I want to start there. The receiving core is just elite. I mean, Trey Harris is, I think, one of the top 2 or 3 receivers in the SEC. With Luther Burden, I think he is exceptional. He is big, strong, fast. He looks like an SEC receiver, which is crazy because he was playing at Louisiana Tech a couple years ago. Again, one of those kind of diamond in the rough guys that they've found so well in the portal. But then you add in Juice Wells, who's a first-team All-SEC guy. Jordan Watkins didn't play this past weekend due to injury, but he's a guy who had 700-something yards last year. And you've got maybe the best tight end in the SEC in Caden Prescore. So, I mean, you've got just an unbelievable surplus of talent for Jackson to get the ball to. But I think the thing with Jackson is, this is his 3rd year now, and Jackson wasn't always like comfortable with everything that was happening here offensively. He was from USC. They've had that air raid. It was a different offense that he came into than Charlie Weiss Jr.'s, and it took a little bit of time to sort of learn the RPO stuff because he hadn't done that at USC under Clay Helton and Graham Harrell. It was very, very different, and so. I think it took a little bit of time, and the turnovers were a big problem that first year. He threw 11 picks. So they bring in Spencer Sanders from Oklahoma State last year, and it's, okay, win the job again. And all he does is win the job again. He cuts his turnovers in half and becomes one of the most efficient players in the country. Well, now there's no competition. This is Jackson Dart's team. This is Jackson Dart's locker room. I think with him, he is just so comfortable with everything they want to do offensively, with the cast of characters, with the personnel, with Lane Kiffin, with Charlie Weiss Jr. He's just in total control of everything. And then, you add in the headset piece, which is just, if you were thinking about teams that is going to be advantageous to, a Lane Kiffin team already goes fast. And now you're going to give them the advantage of not even having to look at the sideline for signs. And a guy who knows this playbook inside and out. They're going to go warp speed now. And so I think that he is just in such control of everything they do. Yeah, he's a dynamic athlete. He's a great runner. He's got a big arm. He's a really good deep ball thrower. He's accurate, all those things. He's tough as nails. I think they'd probably like him to slide a little bit more, but I don't think you're ever going to take that out of Jackson completely. But he's just so comfortable in everything they want to do. I don't think you're going to fool him at this point in his career. And again, when you start getting to that SEC schedule, you need a guy who's seen everything.
You've talked about the good, and I know this is going to be a tough question for you. You've been there almost the entirety of Kiffin's career there in Oxford. Tell me, what are some of the vulnerabilities that you see with this program that you maybe haven't seen in years past? Where are there areas that maybe MTSU could penetrate, find some level of success Saturday?
I think my only like real question with this team is like, and I think it goes back to the offensive line, because we know that they're hypothetically better than they were. We've been told they're better. But like when you bring in guys like Princely, Monmielen, and Walter Nolan on the defensive line, like you're better because 247 Sports tells you got better, right? Because of these 5-star guys you're bringing in. But in the offensive line, they didn't get guys who were maybe quite as highly touted as that. And I know that's not everything. But I think my question is, I think that defensive line is going to give everybody problems. That's going to give Georgia problems. That's going to give, the big boys in the SEC problems. That is a legitimate front. I think my question is the offensive line, maybe it's not as formidable as your defensive line, but can it hold up against elite fronts? And, again, I don't know if Middle Tennessee is going to be able to test that, but I think my question is, like, what happens when you start altering the pocket on Jackson Dart? What happens when you start moving him off his spots? What happens when he gets off his first couple reads? Because again, we see a guy who is so comfortable when everything is happening, and I'm not saying he's going to get rattled if things break down, but I think a defense's best chance is to get in his face and to rattle that pocket. And Furman wasn't able to do that. I don't think a lot of teams are going to be able to do that, but I think the teams that are able to give Ole Miss a problem are the ones that are going to be able to manufacture pressure and get to that offensive line. And I think when that happens, I'm going to be really curious to see how they respond.
I think from an MTSU perspective, being able to control some tempo as well, because as you already mentioned, how fast Lane Kiffin plays it now, he's able to put up 73 points in 3 quarters. If MTSU is able to manufacture some time of possession, get a couple of first downs, I don't think if they walk out of there with 0, it's necessarily a disappointment. But it would be a level of respect if you can keep it under 70 points. I think is really the goal, and ultimately to come out healthy. And I'd say that last part there to put that over on you, Jordan. Watkins was the one that came up injured, or at least he was kind of a surprise to not be listed in week 1. You might have already alluded to a few offensive linemen getting banged up in week 1. Where are the Rebels in regards to health?
That's a good question. We actually, our availability got moved back a little bit today. It was supposed to be in about an hour, but it got moved back to 1:15, I think it is. And yeah, there's always a little bit of gamesmanship there with Ole Miss in terms of what they want to let us. No, I don't think it's anything super serious with those guys. I think that if it's, if you're questionable about it, this probably, in a perfect world isn't a game where you need to have those guys necessarily. Save them for, Wake Forest or, the Kentucky game or, whenever it is you feel like you really need them. And again, that's not to overlook anybody, but maybe this is a game they feel like they can get away with it again. Again, it's Ole Miss is pretty. They hand out a lot of black jerseys, which are the non-contact jerseys, and it's always sort of hard to tell like what it really means. So I was actually pretty surprised that Watkins wasn't even suited up the other day. That was a little bit surprising, but again, I don't think it's anything serious with those guys. I think it's just kind of playing it smart, at least early in the season.
All right, we'll leave you with this final question here. The line opens up at 42, 6 touchdown deficit already from Vegas there. What are your thoughts on how things will go this Saturday?
I don't know if they're going to cover that. Of course, I didn't think they were going to cover whatever the line was this past week at 45 or whatever it was. I think they're going to beat them, pretty handily. I just think this is an Ole Miss team that they're really good at eliminating distractions and not letting things get ahead of where they currently are. Like, they don't overlook teams. That I think was really important to see against Furman. Like, how are you going to handle a team that you should absolutely smoke? Well, they smoked them. And so I think that this is a team that they're not going to overlook anybody. I think they enjoy dominating people. I think they're excited to show people what they can do. I mean, this is the most anticipated Ole Miss season in 50, 60 years. I mean, this is what everybody's been waiting for here. So I think that I don't think they're overlooking anybody. I think they want to go out and dominate people. I think this is probably 45-7-ish kind of game. I think Middle Tennessee will probably score something in there because I think Ole Miss will take its foot off the gas. But I wouldn't be surprised if they're posting a 28-0 or something shutout ish at half, and it feels pretty insurmountable. And then Ole Miss kind of takes the foot off the gas. I think this is a team that is really, really focused right now.
Absolutely. And that is Michael Katz. Again, he is the beat writer for Ole Miss Athletics at the Northeast Mississippi Daily Journal. Michael, I appreciate you coming on. And, of course, best of luck to the Rebels this Saturday.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
And finally, it's time for the Raider wrap-up portion of the episode where we go over the previous week in Blue Raider athletics as well as look ahead to next week. And we will kick things off, as we've talked about for the majority of the episode, talking about football. The Blue Raiders were able to come from behind while also being ahead earlier in the matchup, but come from behind 32-25 against Tennessee Tech. Our player of the week, I think, would go to no one else but Frank Peasant, given his 30-yard touchdown run at the end of the game to secure the win over the Golden Eagles. For the day, he tallied 10 carries for 49 yards, including 2 touchdowns, especially the big one there at the end. And as I just got done talking with Michael Katz, this upcoming Saturday we match up with the Ole Miss Rebels. That game will kick off at 3:15 p.m. Then we'll move on over to soccer. Soccer goes 1-1 on the week. They get a win over Bellarmine on Sunday afternoon by a score of 6-2 amidst all the rain. Our interviewee today, Lebargy, gets 2 goals, including 4 points against the Bellarmine Knights. And then this upcoming week on Thursday, all the way down in Huntsville, they will face Alabama A&M at 3 p.m. And then on Sunday, they will be in Nashville facing the Vanderbilt Lady Commodores. And that game, or match, I should say, is scheduled to kick at 6 p.m. Volleyball started their season this last weekend, traveling all the way to Montana, where they faced the Washington Huskies, losing the first match 0-3, and then they lost to the host school Montana State by a score of 1-3. Our player of the week will go to Kiera Booth, who gets 21 kills and 4 blocks in the 2 games this past weekend. The Villanova transfer is off to a good start for the Lady Raiders. Hopefully they can turn things around this upcoming weekend as they return home against the Lehigh in the Blue Raider Bash here at the Alumni Center. So keep up with all the volleyball taking place here in Murfreesboro. After the Lehigh match on Friday, they will face Southeast Missouri, the Red Hawks that afternoon on Friday at 7 p.m. They have the solo matchup on Saturday against Austin Peay at 6 p.m. And then they will wrap up the Blue Raider Bash on Sunday against old Sunbelt Conference foe Arkansas State. And that match starts at 2 p.m. Cross country got their season started this last weekend. Also on Saturday at the Memphis Twilight Classic, the men ran the 4 mile and the team finished 3rd out of 13. Brian Kiptu got 1st overall. Right behind him was Alan Kiplagata, who also got 2nd place. So we got a 1-2 finish there in the men's, which was always good to see. But finishing up the top 5 for the Raiders was Sammy Singh, Carmelo Canizaro, and Juan Lucas, all finishing within the top 55. And then the ladies who ran the 5K had finished 4th out of 14. And Sandra and Nancy Mayau both went 4th and 8th, respectively, as the top finishers for the Lady Raiders. Eleanor Tao, Haley Gorham, and Lauren Cole all finished within the top 50 as well. And they will have a brief break until their next actual competition, which will be the 13th of Friday, where they will go down to Jacksonville State as a part of the Southern Showcase. Also kicking off their season this upcoming weekend is going to be men's golf. Louisiana Tech is where the men will be traveling to. That's the host institution for the Argent Financial Classic. That does not tee off until Sunday, the 8th, so we will have partial update for you on our next wrap-up on next week's episode because they will be finishing up the Tuesday that it releases. as well as women's golf. They are also starting on the weekend on a Sunday to Tuesday tournament up in Lexington, Kentucky at the Betty Lou Evans Invitational. Again, we will have you a partial update for that on our next episode on Tuesday. And then this upcoming weekend, to wrap things up here, is going to be the men's and women's tennis. They got the Wally Tidwell Pro-Am that's hosted here at MTSU. That's going to be Friday to Saturday. I'm not entirely certain if that's going to be at the outdoor facility or the ATC, but I would stay tuned to social media accounts for that announcement. But the men's and women's tennis kicking off the Pro-Am this upcoming weekend. That is, again, Friday and Saturday here in Murfreesboro. And that will do it for our wrap-up of the episode. I appreciate everyone tuning in this week. I look forward to our next episode where we're going to be doing our reaction from the Ole Miss episode, as well as speaking to one of our volleyball players. So stay tuned for who that volleyball player is going to be. And then we will go behind enemy lines as we look forward to the Western Kentucky matchup, and we will have joining us one of our fellow collaborators on the College Huddle, and as well as our CUSA podcasting roundtable is Stephen Moffitt from Topper Talk. Always good talking with him. So look forward to that, and I appreciate again everyone tuning in this week. And until next time, go Blue.